So I could kill with my bare hands pretty much everybody I come in contact with. You're going to have trained for a very long time if I'm angry to stop me from beating you to death with my bare hands. So do I wear a rash guard around everywhere? Am I all puffed up? Do I make sure everybody knows I'm a badass? Do I like grab my ear and go, look, motherfucker, you better do what I tell you to? How incredibly weak-minded would that be of me? How cowardly, how insecure would I be if I was walking around like that?
So, Nate, if we could go back to your biggest loss ever, which was for the World Heavyweight Championship when you came out of retirement in 2015, after a brutal 2 rounds of fighting, you got submitted by a straight ankle lock. A lot of people have seen this fight, and a lot of people don't know that it was you in it because it was a fight against the 19-year-old kid with Down syndrome that you did to help raise money and to help sort of fulfill his life's dream of becoming an MMA fighter. So tell us about that fight. It's just so fascinating. It's so unlike what a lot of guys in the space would do.
Well, there was only one cause that was going to get me to come out of retirement, and that was a second shot at the title. And when I heard that this young man had been training for a while and he was lined up for a title shot, he just needed some comer to come and get it. I stepped up and said, "Let's see what we can do." And he definitely brought it to me in the first round. Almost finished with an ankle lock right then and there. And in the second round, he came out harder than the first, throwing some bombs. It was a good shot that made the newspaper here with him landing a straight punch on my chin, which pretty much dislocated it. He shot in for the takedown and got the ankle lock, and I had to tap, but it is what it is. I showed up and fought the best that I could. That day was just Mr. Jacob Beckman's, and so be it.
That's fantastic. Uh, that that also raised some money for a Down syndrome integration uh, charity, I believe.
It it did. We were able to sell some shirts, raise some awareness for it. The way this whole thing came about, I was on Facebook and saw that there was a conversation with Mike Pierce and his wife, and speaking about Jacob Beckman, how he'd been training for years, and his dream was to fight in MMA. But everybody told him that that just wasn't possible because he has Down syndrome. And I thought about it and I said, I'm not one that really cares that people tell me what to do. And I can't imagine having a special needs kid that your whole life you're told your kid can't do this. This is the box that your kid fits in. So if I could make it for just a few minutes where this young man can live his dreams and his mother can be a part of that as well, then that was the least I could do. And I've taken much worse beatings for much worse causes.
Hmm.
So for me, it was definitely worth stepping in, and it was an opportunity for me as well to get to know Jacob and his mother and know a little bit more about the community of those that have Down syndrome. And they were just incredibly nice and friendly people. And she was telling me one story about when Jacob was much, much younger. They're at a hotel and they go to get in the hot tub. And one by one, all the families slowly get out of the hot tub till they were just there by themselves. And she realized it was people that they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to talk, how to react to this situation. So her goal then was to print out these cards, which hopefully we were able to do with the money that we raised, that she can hand to people and say, "Hello, my name is Jacob Beckman. I have Down syndrome. It's just an extra chromosome. There's nothing to be worried about. It's not communicable. If you have any questions, feel free to ask." And to me, it just seemed like the right thing to do.
Hmm.
It's pretty much that simple.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on behalf of the sort of one half of the jiu-jitsu slash MMA community, I have to thank you because certainly in the last year and a half that I've really been paying attention, uh, it's amazing to see an MMA guy who's also a jiu-jitsu guy kind of on the side of, I don't know, anti-cult, anti QAnon, pro-masking, pro-vaccination, pro-universal healthcare. I mean, these things that have become such flashpoints in society and become so incredibly politicized. It's just really, really, really rare in the space. I'd say, if anything, even more rare in the MMA space than in the jiu-jitsu space. And it's pretty rare in the jiu-jitsu space.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And yeah, it just kind of blows my mind to see how many people just have no ability to do any critical thinking whatsoever. Now, I was raised in a cult. I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. So I understand the mindset behind it. From my perspective, someone comes along to somebody that's lacking something, that's needing something, and they provide these easy answers. And all too often, easy answers are just, it's enough for most people because it fills that box. They don't have to dive deep. They don't have to think too hard on it. They just say, okay, well, here's my belief system, and that's where I'm at. So with my family specifically, my mother didn't have a great childhood. My father definitely didn't. His father beat the hell out of him. And that was kind of the generational thing that my grandfather beat the shit out of their kids. And then men of my generation, their father most likely reduced a lot of the abuse that came down, but it was still too much.
Still how you raised kids, and you spare the rod and spoil the child.
Yeah, and so I just imagine my parents being called on by the Jehovah's Witnesses in their door-to-door ministry, probably around 1969, 1970 or so, and being given these easy answers. Did you know that you actually do have a very loving father that's always been looking out for you, and everything that's going on is a part of his plan? And especially here in America, people are generally raised with some kind of religious belief, that believe in God, things like that. And hearing something like this, that no, you do have a loving father that's had a plan for you all along. And then they start presenting that, well, you'll be able to live in a paradise on earth with all these animals and people will be raised from the dead, and they start pulling up scriptures. It's only as you get further down the line that they start presenting you, once you're into the organization, that, well, in the future, if any of your kids no longer want to be a Jehovah's Witness, then you'll completely disown them and you'll never talk to them again. And when they're that far down the line, like with my mother, I haven't seen her in coming up on 10 years now. She has 2 grandkids she's never met, will never meet, is my assumption. But she believes she's doing the right thing, and that by remaining loyal to this cult, when she dies, she's going to be resurrected and she's going to live forever on a paradise earth with her husband, my father, who died 20 years ago. Yeah. And so getting her to really critically think about this whole organization, she would have to sit back and go, oh my God, I've wasted the last 50 years of my life. And it's been completely burned into her brain that this is how things are going to go. This is how things are going to be. And she just doesn't have the capacity, from my opinion, to really kind of change her ways. So when I see people that are deciding, this is my club, this is my group, this is my cult, and they don't do any of the critical thinking, it just amazes me. And so often it's all the information is right there. It's a simple Google away. So every time I hear something, or when I have the ability to have a conversation with people about these deeper concepts, I do a lot of listening, and then I try to make sure we understand the same thing, we're on the same page, are we trying to go in the same direction? So most often when I hear something that I know is most likely complete bullshit, my response is always the same. Wow, that sounds terrible. Let's look that up and see if that's true, because if it is, that's really going to change my viewpoint. And one such thing was Obama making a joke. So this was 6 or 7 years ago, if not longer. He was making a joke about changing the Constitution so he could run for a 3rd term and just blowing the conservatives' minds. So a friend that I was talking to said, Obama's going to do it. He's changing the Constitution. He wants to become a dictator for life. Wow, that sounds terrible. Let's Google that and find out the context and see how accurate that is. If it's worth being afraid of, because if he was serious, that's pretty bad. 10 seconds later, oh, this was said at a reporter's correspondence or a roast where they're making all of these jokes. So can you understand the context here that this wasn't something seriously said? You just heard it repeated as if it was serious on Fox or OWN or something like that. And I learned a lesson specifically with this conversation because as Trump was getting sworn in to office, I sent that friend of mine a text saying, man, Obama better hurry up and change that constitution. He's losing the whole game here. And my friend lost his mind over that joke. He was so upset that I had to block his number for a few weeks because he was just filled with rage that I would point something like this out. And I was like, dude, are you kidding me? I thought this was settled, that this was a joke that Obama had made, and now clearly it's all bullshit. And you're so stuck on that and clinging to it as a part of your identity that this is like some huge insult to your intelligence. And there was, in that same conversation with that gentleman, he said, Obama is cutting the meals for our troops down to 2 meals a day. That sounds terrible. Let's look into that and find out where the truth lies. 30 seconds later. Oh, so what the story is that as troops are being removed from, I believe it was Afghanistan at the time, they're going from 4 buffet meals a day to 2 full buffet meals a day with hot everything to 2 meals with hot everything and 2 meals with everything but sandwiches instead of a meatloaf, something like that. Now, I've eaten a lot of meals on bases, on military bases, and the food is incredible. It is a massive buffet. You can get everything you want, all sorts of different options. So to know that 2 of those meals, the breakfast and the dinner, are still going to be that way, but then the late night meal and the lunch meal are going to be all of the options, but instead of a meatloaf or whatever, it would be sandwiches. I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense to me as they're pulling people out of that area, and it doesn't apply to any other base in the rest of the world.
What's interesting, so like you kind of proved your point about Obama likely not trying to change the constitution to run for 3 terms, and you likely proved your point that this wasn't some kind of dastardly attempt to starve the U.S. military into submission. But did that change anybody's mind? Because what it seems like is that so many times that this is a fact and data resistant contagion. And I think your comparison to the Jehovah's Witness cult is really interesting. It's interesting that you went there immediately when I asked you about your current position on many, call them socially divisive issues, if that's the right handle. It doesn't seem that 1 or 2 applications of facts change anybody's opinion here. It's so...
Unfortunately, people seem to really dialed in their club or their religion, for lack of a better word. And it really is bothersome to me that, and I've had plenty of conservative friends over the years that, unfortunately, just in the previous 4 years from now, they've really gone further and further and further to the right. Whereas before, I could ask them, and I did many times, what didn't you like about Obama? And they would lay out point for point, fact by fact, things that I couldn't dispute. And I would say, you're right, that's terrible. I dislike that as well. And then when I point out, well, what about when Trump did this that was much worse, or did this or that other thing, it just goes right over their head. They can't comprehend it. It's all lies. It's just unbelievable to me. And to see these positions just going unchallenged, I can't tell you how many times I've had the conversation with people that have all said the same thing. Biden's no good. He spoke at a Grand Wizard's funeral of the KKK. Wow, that sounds terrible. Let's look into that. 30 seconds later, I forwarded them the article. So, this person you're referring to, his name is Bird. He's a former member of the KKK. As he aged and got older, he said specifically, being a member of the KKK was the worst thing I'd ever done with my life. He was a bastion for reforming, that people don't have to live as piece of shit racists their entire life. They can change things. Not only did Biden speak at his funeral, the head of the NAACP, I believe Obama spoke as well. So doesn't that seem that might be a little odd that Obama would also speak at this KKK Grand Wizard's funeral, unless something major changed over time? And it's just really sad to me that people are so willing to take these these easy answers that fit into this box, and and just cement their position there. It's troubling to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, personally, I think Fox News, Fox in finger quotes news is a big part of this. I mean, people are like, well, you can't trust either side. Well, and it's true, you can't look into every single claim made by every single media station. But I mean, before I was a jiu-jitsu guy, before I was a firefighter, I was a biologist. So I have the ability to like look up scientific papers and scientific studies. And the number of times that I've seen a claim made on Fox News and a claim made, I don't know, by the New York Times, if we could take those as the polar opposites, specifically about science, say it's climate change, say it's COVID, say it's vaccination, say it's mask efficacy, and they're both citing the same studies and coming out with diametrically opposed opinions every single time so far, I'm not saying every single time, but every time I've looked into it, Fox News has been wrong, and the New York Times, on the case of this, what did the science say, has been right. So it's this false equivalency of, both sides lie. Well, hang on a second, because it's demonstrably not true.
I've heard that so many times from so many people. All politicians are the same. And my response is always the same. As soon as you say something like that, that gives you permission to check out. You don't have to apply any critical thinking whatsoever because they're all liars and they're all exactly the same. So why don't we actually look at every individual issue? I know that'll take time, but then we can come to an informed decision on whether or not both sides are equally the same. Now, I have a cop friend who was telling me about a bill that Trump passed to support prison reform, something like that. And you'll have to excuse me with my memory, as well as being punched in the head 10,000 times. What I find with myself is I usually learn something, I kind of get a grasp where I believe it, and then I kind of delete that file. So I'm not going to remember the specific names and things like that. But so my friend was telling me about this law that Trump passed for prison reform, and he called it by the actual name of the bill, which I didn't recognize. And he said, see, that's the mainstream media, got no coverage whatsoever. He did this great thing. And once he started talking about it, I said, oh, no, I'm completely familiar with that bill and what happened. There was a guy that worked on CNN, black guy, that was real big on prison reform, and he went to Trump and went around, and he was really instrumental in getting this bill passed into law. So how much credit do we need to give Trump here for this major prison reform? Did he do an executive order and sign it into law? No, he did not. So let's look at who voted for this law. Oh, most of the Democrats voted for it, and a good section of the Republicans voted against it. So why didn't Obama pass it? Because the Republicans were completely blocking him when he wanted to pass it. And the only way that it got passed at all was when the Republicans realized that they could take credit for it, and they went ahead and voted for it. And yet the same Democrats were voting for it no matter whose name was attached. And we see that when it comes to the stimulus checks we were getting. When it was Trump's stimulus checks, all the Republicans voted for it. So did the Democrats. But then when it was Biden's stimulus checks, all of the Democrats voted for it. None of the Republicans voted for it. So is that the same thing? Are both sides equally the same? No, they're not. Because one wants to only do good for the country when they get the credit. And we can look at guys like Mitch McConnell and all of them who have blatantly said, our goal is to make sure Obama is a one-term president. Our goal is to block everything that Obama tries to do. And he said it again when Biden took office. So we've had now, 8 years of Obama, 4 years with Trump, where they still wouldn't let the Democrats do anything. Now the first year into Biden. So we've had 13 years of Republican obstruction, and we see this every single time. And when I hear this, we just want small government. We want to be able to run our businesses. No, you don't. Sure, you can call it that, but in reality, what you're doing is you're opening the floodgates for these massive monopolies to do everything and crush small businesses. Look at the Walmarts. 80% of their goods come from China. How many thousands, millions of jobs have been lost because the capitalists bought the politicians so they can ship all their goods over from China and do things here? Look up Huffy bicycles. When they started selling at Walmart, they were an American-made bicycle, was here. And then Walmart came to them and said, okay, so we're selling all your bikes now. We need you to cut the cost. Like, oh, well, how much? 10%. Now all the small shops start going out of business because they're getting undersold by Walmart. And it's great to say, hey, let's shop locally. But it's very difficult to do that when you're getting paid very little money. Minimum wage hasn't gone up in how many years? So you have people that are on a tight budget that want to shop locally, but they simply can't. So now they're shopping more at Walmart. Walmart is the number one employer in 21 states. Think about that. And with 80% of their
Amazon
goods,
is probably the other employer in the remaining 29 states.
And with them shipping so many of their goods over from China and losing all of these jobs, and year by year, then Walmart goes to Huffy and says, we need you to lower your prices again. Well, why? Aren't you making enough? No, we want more. And if you won't do that, then we'll just start manufacturing bikes and we'll cut you out. So Huffy then had to go overseas to get the bikes manufactured so they could keep up with Walmart's prices. It cracks me up because when people talk about politicians are corrupt, sure, I can be corrupt too. I'm for sale. Man, I'll say whatever you want me to say. Do I have any buyers? Is anyone willing to buy me? That's the case. Who is buying these politicians? And when we look at where the donations are coming from, almost exclusively, it's the Republicans taking these millions of dollars from these dark money groups that are wanting the jobs to go overseas so they can keep raking in their billions of dollars. The Republicans are the ones fighting to keep the minimum wage down, to make sure that we don't have any paid leave, that we don't have health care. And just jumping into healthcare really quickly.
Careful, I'm
every other country like yourself, you have it figured out. You know how to pay for all this. We here in America pay substantially more than other developed nations, and we get much worse care.
I'll probably, if you're really rich and you've got amazing healthcare and you live in amazing healthcare coverage and you live in, I don't know, Beverly Hills, you're going to get better care, but you're paying way more for it. I would agree that like the data does bear out that the average American with the average healthcare pays way more for less care. So I think they can point to, like, I don't know, the Mayo Clinic. Yeah, what are the odds of somebody living in Snyder, Nebraska, of getting in at the Mayo Clinic to have their, I don't know, to have their tonsil cancer taken care of? Zero.
So I worked in healthcare for about 14 years. I was a spokesman for the company that did my back surgery, and I was fighting. I had
I do want to talk about that later. So
okay, and I ended up getting the surgery, and I became a spokesman for this company for 14 years, just telling my story and what was done to me. We would go to war with these insurance companies. They actually set up a branch that was solely their whole job was just to fight with insurance companies, because a surgeon would take an x-ray, an MRI, tell a patient, you need this surgery, this will get you your life back, you're good to go. The insurance company would get this and say, really? Do you really need it? Why don't we just increase your OxyContin prescription? I met people that were crawling around on the floor. They could not stand. Their pain was so bad. And the insurance company is just saying, no, you don't need this surgery. And their whole goal was to delay until the patient gives up, to deny until the patient gives up or switches to another insurance company, or that the patient dies.
Yeah.
And that's their whole goal. And that's supposedly our bastion of freedom here in America, where it reminds me of MMA. You need two people willing to fight. And if you want to make money, you need fans willing to pay to watch that fight. That's all you need. But all of a sudden, we have this third person that comes in the middle, the promoter, and says, well, hey, I'm going to get the venue and I'm going to run some commercials and I'm just going to keep 85% of the money. Well, why? Why do we need that? So you have patients, you have surgeons then in comes this insurance company. I'm just going to pool everybody's money here, and I'm going to take $10 million for myself because I'm working really hard, and then I'm going to deny your surgery. It makes no sense in any real world, and yet the American people are so propagandized, and most of them have never traveled outside of the United States. They don't know how badly they're being taken.
Well, as the only Canadian on this podcast between the two of us,
I'm an unofficial Canadian. I've been adopted.
Okay.
After two of my fights in Montreal, I was told I'm an honorary Canadian.
Awesome. I hope they came with, I don't know, in Montreal, that would be poutine and beer.
Nice.
I would say that 80 to 90% of Canadians look at what's going on south of the border healthcare wise and go, oh my God, keep that shit away from me. Thank God we've got our healthcare. And of course we have problems. And I talk to people in Australia and Austria and Germany and the UK, and they all say there are problems. And our system could be better. But I mean, I just came through a hip replacement surgery 7.5 weeks ago. Never once did I say, geez, I hope my insurance covers this. Or, all I paid for was the parking at the hospital to go for a follow-up visit. That's it. So like, that's $20. It's expensive parking. They're ripping you off. It's $20 for the day. I'm willing to pay $20 in parking that goes into hospital general admin funds. I think that's okay. I could have taken the bus if I'd really wanted to take the bus. But I don't think that most I've met so many kids who've had like Liz Frank fractured dislocations of their feet. They're doing MMA. They break their foot apart. It's something that needs to be treated soon or it gets worse. And they're like, yeah, my healthcare kicks in, I don't know, 2 months from now. So I'm just going to like hobble around for 2 months and then my healthcare kicks in. The linking of healthcare to your employer in the United States is one of the most pernicious things ever, because it so hugely increases the cost of saying, screw you, I'm going to go work for somebody else. Oh yeah, well, I hope you don't get cancer in the next however many months that it takes to for your new health insurance to kick in. I sure hope that job offer comes through and they don't pull it at the last minute, because then you're uninsured, and good luck.
And it's such a ridiculous situation here. Was it 2 years ago? Our health insurance for me and my wife, and we had a baby in December. Our health insurance for that year cost $20,000. With our monthly costs, I had a bicep surgery. I had an appendix surgery. We had the child born, so 20 grand. Then everything shut down. All of my business opportunities went away. We got on our Oregon health plan for 2021, which meant that the government provided us health care. So our costs for the year were $0. We got the same care.
Really?
I went to the same doctors, got the same treatment, everything like that. And what this really made me realize...
That belies my point then, doesn't it?
How much you're rewarded here for not working. So if I have this option of working at a job that I hate, making 30 grand, and knowing 2/3 of that money is going to go to healthcare, or don't work at that job and get free healthcare, I'm not out 30 grand. I'm really only out 10 grand. And that's what I wish people could understand. We're rewarding people for not working. We're punishing people for working. Whereas if we had this truly socialized medical care, so many more people, that would never be a question. And I've seen this over and over again. Well, if I make an extra 5 grand, my expenses go up 15,000. So why would I want to get that second job? Why would I want to take that advancement? It's better for me to do little to nothing and stay in this little box where I get my free healthcare. We don't want to reward people for not working more, and yet that's the game that's been created here, where we do reward people for working less, and it shouldn't be that way.
Okay, so we've pretty much established beyond a shadow of a doubt your left-ish credentials, and some would say your pinko commie freedom-hating credentials here.
Well, of course.
So in the entire MMA sphere, I can think of you And I think Junior Dos Santos posted a picture of him getting vaccinated saying something like, I believe in science. And that's it. That's, maybe there's others, but I haven't come across it, of guys in the MMA space, be that promoters, be that coaches, be that fighters, having any, like, if roughly half of society believes that, I don't know, vaccines are the devil, that Trump is a light worker who's trying to free the children, that the solution to have the shootings in school is to arm teachers and students and pre-kindergarten kids. If that's roughly half of society, it's less than half, but, and then the other half is people who don't believe that. You'd think that some MMA fighters would be on that other side of what I would call rationality, what people would call the extreme left, but it wasn't the extreme left. That's actually the center that's been pushed over to the left in the last 20 years. Why is there such silence? Where are the other voices?
Well, I'll tell you, people have this thought, this belief that fighters are these incredibly strong, powerful people. I've seen more men with daddy issues than you can imagine in the MMA world. Over and over again, this sport becomes a way for somebody to, I'm never going to be pushed around again. I'll show you, mom and dad. And truthfully, that was a big part of my motivation as well. I was very angry when I was young. I was not allowed to participate in any sports. Once I found MMA, it was a way for me to get rid of those feelings, to hurt other people in a healthy manner, until such time came for me that I began to realize how to compete in a more of a healthy way. And I had to have this critical thinking there as well. Coming from a cult, you either immediately jump into another cult because that's where you're comfortable, or you keep those critical thinking skills and question everything. And you have people that are used to being told what to do by a coach. They grew up with either without that fatherly influence, or a very negative, abusive fatherly influence that carries them through their generation into their kids' generation. And it becomes just the simple answers to these complex problems, where people don't look beyond the very simplistic things. I saw a snippet of Joe Rogan talking to somebody, and he was going on and on about how the immigrants are changing the way that we vote here in America. That when they do the census, that now certain states are going to have more congressmen and women, and they're going to have more of a voting ability, and it's really going to sway the elections. And Joe's just sitting there nodding, going, oh, wow, that's really deep. Oh, wow, I hadn't thought about that. And I'm sitting here pulling out my hair going, so when's the last time that a Republican won the popular vote for presidency? 40 years? I don't think it's been in my lifetime. How many votes did Trump lose the last election? And was it a nail biter? 7 million. What's the population of Wyoming? Under 600,000. It's getting smaller every year. How many senators do they have? 2. What's the population of California? Close to 40 million. How many senators do they have? 2. Which direction does California lean? More liberal, Wyoming, more to the right, and yet those 600,000 have the same voting capability as the 40 million in Canada. And then I would have followed up with the question, so then I guess what you're saying is that you want every vote to count, every citizen, that their vote should count for one. So you want a popular vote then, right? Something where a minority of people doesn't control the majority. And then watch them lose their mind and talk about how the Constitution is sacred and it never should be changed, and how the left is always bashing the Constitution. Of course, then I'll get into the times when Trump said that the Constitution is phony, that he wants to take people's guns away, take them to courts afterward, on and on and on. All the bullshit propaganda that the right just sells over and over again. On the news here, every time there's an election, there's magically a caravan of illegal aliens coming up to our border. And the last time, they all had shirts printed about Biden and Harris, let us into America. Do you really think that these immigrants coming from South America, walking, I don't know, thousands of miles to come up to our border, stopped and all had shirts printed? Or was that most likely some right-wing nutjob who knows that the only way to continue getting these votes is through fear-mongering and rage-baiting? They don't have any actual arguments that are going to make the country better. And we can see that by what they're voting on. What do we pay for insulin compared to Canada?
Yeah,
What
crazy.
you pay up there is about $12. What we pay here is $97. We're paying roughly 10 times for insulin, something that's been around for, 100 years, than you are up there. Who voted to lower those prices? The Democrats. Who voted against it? The Republicans. So are they really for the working class? Who's been trying to raise the minimum wage? The Democrats. Who's been shutting it down? The Republicans. Over and over again, we see these policies that don't help Americans at all. And let's just say, I'm full of shit. I don't know what I'm talking about. Cool. Let's make it simple then. Let's go to the numbers. Which states are the poorest educated? 9 out of 10, Republicans. Which states take the most socialist federal dollars? 9 out of 10, Republican states. Over and over and over again, all of these things that the Republicans say that they're against, they have their hands out secretly. And this was something that really got me. So, coming from my background, I knew next to nothing about Congress passing laws, anything like that. After all, God's kingdom was going to come and wipe away the American government, so why would I need to know this? Well, now I find myself in Washington, D.C., working to pass the All Expansion Act, which will protect fighters from shady promoters. My first trip back there, I'm hanging with Republican Congressman Mark Wayne Mullen. Trump had just been elected. I don't think he was in office yet. But I asked him, so a big thing that Trump was working on there was the simplifying how we pay our taxes. Just going to make it a simple postcard that you send in. It's going to be really simple. So when can we expect that? Mark Wayne Mullen turned and looked at me, and with a little smile, he said, "Oh, well, you know. Well, because, this guy's going to want to write off for this, and that guy's going to want to write off for that. It's a lot more complicated than it sounds with just doing it on a postcard." And all of a sudden, I realized it was like the curtain had been pulled back, and I saw that this is all just a shell game. That, it's all bullshit and lies. You have no intention whatsoever of simplifying taxes. In fact, it's gotten worse and worse because the TurboTax people, the companies that make money filing taxes, are buying off our politicians to make sure we don't pass laws to simplify our tax structure. And you know that. You're just repeating the lie, the easily believed and beloved lie to all of these voters, and you're going to keep doing it every single election cycle. And I realized a long time ago.
I can't say I disagree with anything that you've said, Nate, but I do want to get back to the point of why has the MMA space gone so far, I guess you would argue, to the Republican side. I mean, I guess when you've got Dana White having the guest of honor Donald Trump at a UFC, that is sending a message. But it's not just Dana White, it's not just the UFC, it's almost every MMA fighter, it's almost every jiu-jitsu fighter, it's almost every MMA coach, it's almost every jiu-jitsu coach, it's almost every Gracie. Like, it really does seem like that combative space has gone over to that side.
Well, if you look at kind of the mindset of what the extreme right or the more right-leaning people think about, they're going to say things like, "Stop being such a pussy. You just need to man the fuck up. What is it? Why are you so upset about every little thing everybody's doing here?" And they get angry at this, at being told that, hey, what you're saying is rude and inconsiderate, and maybe don't talk that way. And I think technology, for one thing, has gone beyond to where people seem to think that they can tweet like they're in the garage drinking with their buddies watching the fights. No, you have to think about that tweet that you're sitting at Thanksgiving dinner with your grandmother Would you say that exact same thing? Would you use that same verbiage right there? Or like with Joe Rogan or the comedians that talk about this cancel culture. My question to them would be, do you have any black friends? Any African American friends? Do you ever refer to them by the N word? Do you refer to them by the N word with a soft A at the end to their faces? You don't do that? Well, why is that? Well, isn't that cancel culture? Shouldn't you be able to call him whatever you want to? Or is it that you believe in cancel culture for certain areas, but not for anything that you find trivial? And so you have this culture of men, specifically somewhat of women, that their whole being has been around how tough they are, how nothing bothers me, and they want to put that on others. At which point I want to tell them, you're the ones that have given up. You're the ones that are actually weak because you're seeing things how they are and saying, just get over it. That's just how shit goes. And other people are saying, no, we can actually fight to change things. And we have fought to change things.
They would all describe themselves as warriors, right? There isn't are you a warrior? Absolutely. I train UFC. Okay, great. Now, back in the day, did warriors just like run around randomly stabbing people in a village? No. You protected the village, right? That was your role as a warrior, was actually to protect the people who couldn't fight. Your goal was to protect, I don't know, the mothers, the children, the grandmothers, the grandfathers. There was actually an element of social responsibility to it. Now, it's easy to, I'm sure there are exceptions to that, but it wasn't like, we're going to train you with all these skills and then do whatever you want with them. So this idea that there's no, being a warrior means being completely independent, not having any kind of responsibility for other people, for other people's health, for other people's mental well-being. I can just tweet whatever I want. I can just quote Himmler all I want, and I'm a warrior. Man,
it's so sad to me because to me that is 100% a weak man's impersonation of strength. So I could kill with my bare hands pretty much everybody I come in contact with. You're going to have trained for a very long time if I'm angry to stop me from beating you to death with my bare hands. So do I wear a rash guard around everywhere? Am I all puffed up? Do I make sure everybody knows I'm a badass? Do I like grab my ear and go, look, motherfucker, you better do what I tell you to? How incredibly weak-minded would that be of me? How cowardly, how insecure would I be if I was walking around like that? And we see that over and over again with these people that are so incredibly insecure that they have to open carry a gun when they're at Starbucks. That they have to make sure everybody knows, I train, bro. Look at how tough I am. You need to stop being such a pussy. Well, whatever happened to quiet confidence? I don't want people to be afraid of me. I don't want people to be worried about me when I'm in the room. I know I can handle myself. It's not a question for me. And there's been times, like I went to buy a car for cash a few months ago, and I was carrying several $1,000s on me to do this deal in a parking lot, and I thought about it. I was like, well, we're meeting at a bank in broad daylight. The odds of something being shady here are very low, but what if they pulled out a gun and decided they wanted to rob me? And I thought about it and I said, so if I pulled out a gun, what's going to happen then? Well, now tension just rose incredibly. Maybe he shoots me, maybe I shoot him, maybe we both shoot each other, maybe we shoot a bystander. I think that the situation would get substantially worse if I was carrying. And so I made the decision to show up. And if somebody decided to rob me at gunpoint, I would go, you know what? My life is not worth this amount of money. I don't want to take your life to defend this amount of money. So I made the conscious decision to just say, no, I'm going to show up and whatever happens is going to happen. But I'm not going to make things worse by presenting that kind of an attitude. And I see guys, just like we had this kid, Kyle Rittenhouse, who went to the Black Lives Matter protest, open carrying an AR-15. Did he make things better or worse by being there with that gun? Only 2 people were killed that night by him. If he didn't show up, or if he didn't show up with a gun, would 2 people have died? I don't think so. He made things substantially worse because of his attitude going into the situation. And we see these men that just have no comprehension of what true strength is. Did you ever see the movie Schindler's List?
Yes.
Do you remember the scene where Oskar Schindler is trying to convince the Nazi all the power he has in the world by not shooting and killing the child with his rifle?
Yes.
He says, you have so much strength, it would be easy for you to kill him. Easy. It's the easiest thing in the world. How much stronger is it for you to show mercy to not shoot that child? And I think about that often, where we're so confused about this show of strength, is we have to make sure everybody knows I don't put up with this shit, and I'm armed, and I'm ready to go at any time. And I'm sitting here going, I'm ready for whatever, but I'm definitely not looking for trouble. I don't want trouble. I will be the first to run away. If I'm in a bar and somebody comes up to me and wants to start some shit, I'll go, dude, I'll go someplace else. If it's that important to you, I didn't come out here to get punched in the face, to punch you in the face. I came out here to hang out with my wife and with my friends, have a good time, and if that's not possible in this bar, I'll go someplace else. Because my ego knows exactly where I'm at in the food chain, and I don't need to prove these things.
Well, to go back to your buying a car in a parking lot with cash example, let's say the guy had pulled out his gun, and let's say you'd pulled out your gun, and let's say you'd gone through the standard NRA fantasy scenario of putting 2 in his chest, 1 in his head, you win. The amount of shit that you're going to go through in the next year I guarantee you, by the end of that year, if somebody could say, hey, we can make all this go away for $2,000, you'd be like, here's $10,000. Let me not remember this. Let me not have gone through the legal process. Let me not have had to deal with this person's parents. Let me not have had to deal with the cops. I mean, as you point out, you could probably kill most people that you meet with your bare hands. And, knowing that means that you almost don't have to. Like, you can let somebody beak, I'm going to kick your ass. It's like a little chihuahua going, ruff, 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 ruff. You don't need to react necessarily. It's not that little chihuahua isn't questioning the size of your manhood. He's barking.
I was at the airport a few years ago, getting ready to get on a flight. I was at the food court, and I start to hear this kind of commotion going on. And I kind of listen up, and I'm thinking to myself, are these college kids who've had too much to drink, they're having a good time, or is this something more sinister? And I look over, and there's what appears to be a married couple, middle-aged, just landed, I assume walking to get their luggage, and another guy in their face yelling at them, wanting to start a fight. I'll beat your ass, bro, I don't care, blah, blah, blah. And the gentleman is saying, will somebody please help? Will somebody call security? And I'm looking around, and I thought, well, I guess it's me. So I stand up, and I walk in between them, and I say to the very excited guy, like, hey, man, I don't know what this is about, but it's probably best to just let it go, not worry about it. So he starts yelling at me, and I don't give a fuck about this and that and the other. No, I get that. I understand that you're really upset about something. I don't know what it is. I'm just letting you know. Many years from now, when you look back on this day, it won't be fondly. There is no way that this ends well for you. I'm just letting you know that whatever this situation is, it's probably not worth getting in an altercation about. And he looked at me so confused because I'm standing there so calmly. And I was just like, man, let it go. Because I can think of over and over again instances where I got upset over nothing, and now with the benefit of hindsight, just thinking, wow, I definitely made that situation worse. What an idiot I was to get upset over nothing. I should have taken a breath. I should have walked away. And that's how I really try to do things now. I'm raising my kids with that type of a mindset. So we're not just these reactionary beings to whatever fly got in our ointment for this minor second. But for whatever reason, that man had something that is worth fighting over in an airport, on federal property. with security guards everywhere, where he could then be put on a no-fly list, get imprisoned for years. Who knows how this goes down? Maybe one punch and the guy falls and hits his head and it's involuntary manslaughter.
Yeah.
Now you're in prison for many, many years.
Yeah.
It's over and over again. It's just really not worth these things. And it's much better to not let the fear and rage overtake someone when you can let things go, talk it out, work it out, whatever the case may be.
Let's do a hard pivot. You mentioned earlier your back surgery. I think you've had 2 back surgeries, is that correct? And a host of other surgeries. What surgeries have you had?
Oh, geez.
Let's see if we can remember.
I've had 10 major surgeries. So the first one was my right pectoral got torn off rolling jiu-jitsu with Randy Couture. He caught me in an armbar before I could tap. He tore my pec off. So I got that put back together. Had my left ankle broken on Tough One. Randy Couture, again, he hit me from behind with somebody he was shooting a takedown on, broke my ankle, had to get that operated on. Had my left bicep reattached, throwing a left hook, tore that off. My appendix, it had not burst, but it was leaking. So that's 4. Had my face reconstructed, that's 5. Had my face reconstructed again, that's 6. I've had 3 back surgeries, so that's 7, 8, 9. And there's a 10th in there someplace. I can't remember what, but something.
Okay.
Something, I think. Cut again. And those are all the major injuries. I spent a lot of time in the hospital with infections. I was getting really bad staph infections for a while. I didn't know why. And one was I think it was my right leg. I had a staph infection, so I go into the doctor's office. They make a slice and they take out what's called a sac of cellulitis, the infection. Then they put packing inside of it so it can heal from the inside out. A couple days later, I call the doctor and I say, hey, this doesn't seem like it's getting any better. My leg is really tender to the touch. I've only got off the couch to go to the bathroom in the past 2 days. He says, no, it's fine. It's the antibiotics are going to work. Take some time. The next day I call him and I go, dude, I can't even walk. So I go into the hospital. This is just a side story. And the doctor there looks at my leg and says, oh, yeah, this is bad. This is infected. I need to take the packing out. So I steel myself and she yanks it out. I said, okay, well, that was miserable. She goes, yeah, I have to clean out the wound now. So she takes a Q-tip with antibiotics and swabs it inside the wound, inside my leg. And I'm just white knuckling it, just about ready to pass out from the pain. Finally, she finishes and I said, thank God that's over. And she goes, I'm sorry, I have to pack it. And I went, lady, do what you got to do. I'm just going to be here screaming. And so she's packing my wound and I'm just screaming, God. And then they leave a tail of it out so it can heal from the inside. And then I'm told to go down to a hospital admission, and I'm under the impression I'm just going to get an IV of antibiotics and get sent on my way. Well, apparently that wasn't what the order said. It said I needed to get checked in to intensive care and get antibiotics around the clock. So I'm arguing with the admitting nurse about all this, saying, hell no. And my deductible was $5,000. And I'm an unemployed fighter before I even made it into the UFC, so I'm completely broke. And I'm arguing with the admitting nurse, no, just give me my IV bag, send me on my way. And finally, a doctor comes over to talk to me, and he's looking at my chart. And he said, so I hear you don't want to get checked in. You're probably thinking you could take this IV bag and then just pull the IV out and hobble out of the hospital. I had literally been thinking that. I was like, is there a word balloon above my head? And the doctor says, yeah, you could do that. You're a tough guy. I'm sure you could handle that. Of course, the next time I see you compete, it'll be in the Special Olympics because you're going to lose that leg. Oh, well, shit, man, that's all you had to say. Check me in. And so for the next 3 days, I was there in the hospital getting IVs of antibiotics. And the whole day staff hated me because I was arguing with the admittance nurse. And the night staff loved me because I was a good, willing patient by the time they came on. And again, I got the $5,000 bill for my treatment here in the States on top of everything else that I paid. And yeah, that's just one of the small things that happens.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you still have your leg.
Me too.
So tell me about the back. You've had 3. So was it disc fusion, or was it vertebra fusion? Was it artificial discs? What was it? And I promise I'm not getting.
So
You might be getting paid by the back implant
no
company, but
longer.
I'm not.
No longer. I'm no longer a spokesman for them. They just went in another way. I still believe in the procedure. But so at my L23, so just below my rib cage, my upper lumbar spine, I had bone on bone grinding. So I had just fought Rich Franklin a few months afterwards. I slowed down my trainings, slowed down the anti-inflammatories, all that stuff. My back started hurting, so I quit training more. My back started hurting more. Got the x-rays, and the vertebrae were just grinding on top of each other. The shock absorber in between them is completely gone. And usually it's like a jelly donut in between your vertebrae that let you move and all this stuff. Well, with mine gone, I got introduced to a doctor that just learned this new procedure called an XLIF, extreme lateral inner body fusion, where they come in from the side and do the surgery through there. They stick a guide wire through your psoas, use telescoping tubes to open up a little hole, and they can do the whole surgery through that little opening. So they're not just slicing through the muscle tissue. They have a nerve monitoring system, and it worked great. 6 months later, I was 100%. I could see on the x-rays.
They fused L2 and L3?
So they scrape out what's left of the disc, because the vertebrae are still kind of connected by this worn away thing. They put in a spacer about the size of a Lego, and they put bone material around it. And you can use cadaver, you can use your own, whatever the case may be. They'll put a couple screws in it to hold everything solid, and then it slowly heals and grows together. Let everything fuse together. It's much like if you break your arm.
Mm-hmm.
Doctor doesn't work magic. They put a cast on it, they put the bones in alignment, and then your body heals itself. So that's what they did with my lower back. And the body will eventually do that itself. It's called autofusing. Of course, it's horrifically painful as it happens over years. And then the vertebrae will fuse together, maybe crooked, definitely not at the right height, so you can have nerve pain, things like that. 15 months after that, I was back fighting in the UFC. And it was something that nobody thought was possible. Then a few years later, I had another disc go bad, my L4-5, so lower in the lumbar spine. This time I went with the same procedure, but I wanted to try an artificial disc. And for whatever reason, the disc did not fuse into my body. I found out later that my testosterone was at about 2% of what a healthy person's level should be, because I was on really high levels of opioids, coping with the pain, all that kind of stuff. So the surgery went incredibly well. I was up walking around the hospital within 12 hours. But if you think about it, if I give you 2 2x4s and I say, hey, nail these together, that's essentially a fusion. And that'll last forever. If I say, here's these 2 2x4s, I want you to give me a 90-degree, like a U-joint here type of thing that's of the same material as the bone, that's not going to, or with the wood, that's not going to react to anything. And it needs to last for 40 or 50 years while holding about 60 pounds. That's a lot harder task. So with me, I noticed within a couple months that something wasn't quite right. I didn't feel like it was fusing the joint as it should. So I went back under the knife. They did the XLIF procedure, and the doctor told me later, it's like, yeah, it just never fused in place. So was it due to my lower testosterone, that my body wasn't healing well enough? I don't really know. But I had my second XLIF to fix that, and it's been awesome ever since. Of course, I've done so much damage to my body. If you look at my lumbar spine under x-rays, all of my discs are collapsing. And it was about 3 years ago, I was once again on pretty high levels of opioids and nerve anti-inflammatories because I had really bad sciatica. And then I got introduced to CBD. And CBD from the cannabis plant has no psychoactive, no THC in it whatsoever. And I started taking the CBD, and the company I use is Receptra Naturals. I'm not a paid spokesman. They give me product. I don't make a dime if anybody buys Receptra. I'm just telling you what works for me. I started taking the CBD. Within months, I was completely off of OxyContin. I was off of the nerve anti-inflammatory. I was off of the Norco, and I'm completely drug-free. And it was 100% due to the CBD, because for me, it's 100% an anti-inflammatory, to where it took away my sciatica. It's just been phenomenal.
It's funny, when I sort of started training jiu-jitsu in the late 80s, early 90s, the joke was that ibuprofen is the grappler's vitamin. But by the early 2000s, it had changed, and the joke was, and it's not a funny joke, that oxy was the fighter's vitamin. And when I take a look at the number of fighters I know personally and that I've read about and heard about who've used oxy to help them get through the day, I mean, it's an opioid. It's a serious fucking opioid. And certainly it has led to much more severe, uh, opioid addictions, heroin addictions, deaths. Man, it's serious stuff, and it's well worth trying just about anything to not live a life that where an opioid gets you through the day.
Very much so. And like I said, the CBD, it doesn't make me feel good. It just makes me not feel bad, because it's not messing with my brain chemistry like an opioid does. You take an opioid and yeah, you feel good. Those pain sensors are off. But with the CBD, it's such an anti-inflammatory for me. And it's funny, some days I'll be feeling fine. There was a time when I ran out of my CBD. I didn't get some. I was like, no, I'm good. It doesn't really help me that much. A couple days later, I was like, oh my God, I'm aching. Get me that CBD back, because I'd forgotten what a phenomenal job it does for me.
Now, the kind of received wisdom about spinal fusion, where you're fusing two vertebrae, is that, say you fuse your L2 and your L3, that this increases the wear between your L3 and your L4, and increases the wear between your L2 and your L1. That it increase because that area is stiff, that the spine around it needs to then do extra flexing and wears it down faster. Is that actually true?
I would say yes, because it's just a mechanical issue. Anytime that you take out one shock absorber, the other ones are going to work more so. But the question then becomes, so what are your alternatives here if you don't want to go with the fusion? You can go with the artificial disc. Like I said, it didn't work for me, but I have known many people it's worked for. In the neck, it's a very simple procedure. I've seen a lot of people get to that and have just a wonderful results with it. But lower in the spine, it's just a little bit more difficult. You've got such a twisting, so much weight. So it's kind of curious there. But if I'm looking at the situation and people have asked me, well, what about my mobility? Well, each level that you fuse, you lose roughly 2% of your mobility or so. Well, when you're in that much pain, you've probably lost about 60% of your mobility,
Yeah.
because you're hurting so badly. Exactly. So once you get the surgery and you're out of pain, are you really going to notice, oh shit, I'm only at 98%? Whereas before you were at 60%. So it is definitely a thing to think about. The question is, why did that level go bad in the first place? Does your body have a tendency to do that? Do you have degenerative disc disease? Was it an injury? And now that I know that my discs are potentially in line for more surgeries in the future, I use my inversion table all the time, keep things stretched out, which has been a game changer for me as well, because my hips get so tight that it's almost like I'm leaning forward. When I get on my inversion table, it stretches out my hips. I can stand upright without my lower back fighting against my hips.
I don't like the inversion
That and the
table. I
CBD.
find that the clamps around the ankles hurt, and then it seems it stretches my knees more, which makes sense, right? Because if, I don't know, half your body weight, let's say you're trying to stretch out your lower back, roughly half your body weight's going to be pulling it down. But three-quarters of your body weight, or 90% of your body weight, is going to be pulling on your knees. So I find that there's an inversion table. It's not an inversion table. It's an inversion device where it's like you're sitting, but you're upside down. So you're pulling down on the front of your thighs, and it takes the pain out of the ankles and the knees. I found that was Invertrack, I think it's called, and I'm not getting paid by them. Uh, that really helped.
That makes sense to me. It doesn't bother my knees and ankles, but for somebody that it does, I could completely see that. When I started using mine, it was just kind of figuring it out. And you don't have to go completely upside down. You can go at an angle until you build up to it. And then I realized I got so comfortable, I'd be hanging upside down for 10 minutes. And then when I'd come up and the next day, I'd be like, holy shit, I overstretched everything. Then I'd be really sore from all of that connective tissue that was overly stretched. So now I'm just a couple minutes a day. Keeps everything really loose, keeps my back from aching. It's been huge for me.
With that much wear and tear on your body, what are you doing to stay in shape? Are you doing any MMA training?
See that?
Simple.
I'm doing jujitsu.
Really?
I'm doing jujitsu 3 times a week. I'm doing gi jujitsu. And so once I got done fighting, and my last fight was now 11, coming up on 12 years ago, my whole left side of my face was shattered after that fight. So I had to get massive reconstructive surgery. So that was about, by the time I got the surgery in 6 months healing, that was about 7 months since my fight. And then I needed to get that first back surgery. So now we're in the 2012 area, or the second, according to the timeline. And then I needed to get a reconstruction on that back surgery. So now we're into 2013 or so. So I had quite a few years there of lost time from surgeries, recoveries. Then I was still on the opioids. And honestly, I was really burned out. It had been such a stressful endeavor for me, fighting as a single father for so many years, that it was really just overwhelming. Knowing when you step in to fight, and this 15 minutes, this is going to determine your entire future, your entire year. And so for me, fighting, it was getting less and less fun and more stressful. So I took a lot of time off afterwards. And then when I got married about coming up on 4 years ago, that's when I discovered the CBD. And I realized, maybe my body can handle rolling around a little bit. And I started going to just the beginners no-gi classes and rolling with small people. And I wasn't doing too bad. My body was feeling good. And again, the CBD was helping, and started training more and more.
I'm glad to see that a high-level UFC contender is capable of crushing smaller people in a beginner no-gi class. This is...
Well, it's building my way back. You'll like the way the story ends. So I keep training with these guys, and then, geez, it's been close to 2 years ago now, the start of COVID and everything. And my wife had actually asked me, do you want to go someplace else and train with some better guys? And my response was, nah, I'm good. I'm very happy being the big fish in my tiny little pond. I'm learning stuff. It's a class. Because there's 3 kinds of jiu-jitsu. There's MMA jiu-jitsu, there's no-gi jiu-jitsu, and there's gi jiu-jitsu. MMA jiu-jitsu is my specialty. No-gi jiu-jitsu is what I've been doing for the past 20 years. Gi jiu-jitsu, I took off the gi when I was 27 or so and said, I'm a fighter now. I'm not wearing the gi. It's everything I'm doing is just focused around MMA. But when COVID hit and they shut down the classes and everything, there's a buddy of mine who at the time was a 2-stripe black belt, about my size, said, hey, I'm looking for COVID training partners, guys that are going to take this seriously. He's a cancer survivor. He has kids. It's like, are we willing to work together? And so we started training together just one-on-one, and I put on the pajamas and my purple belt, and he just kicked the shit out of me. And then he invited another guy who was following the COVID protocols, a 2-stripe black belt who outweighs me by 10, 15 pounds, depending on the day. And he was kicking the shit out of me too. And so it's been being humbled once again. But the really interesting thing to me was, after I had been training for a few months, I kind of realized to myself, I was like, when I was 24, half a lifetime ago, when I first walked through those doors, was because I was excited about this. I was interested. I wanted to learn. This was fun for me. And then it became a job and very stressful. And now I'm back training again for the enjoyment of it, the excitement of it. And I learned something new no matter who I'm rolling with. And I still like to roll with the guys that I'm better than. And let's be clear, there's, with 25 years on the mat in some capacity, there's things that I do really well. If I get crossbody on somebody, it's going to be a tough day for them to get out. But when people are grabbing my sleeves and my collar, I'm still at that. I've got to come out of the subconscious mind, come into the conscious mind. Okay, how are they gripping? Where do I want to grip? Do I want to pull this aside? And it keeps my mind activated. And as you know, once you go home, it's not like running on the treadmill. Nobody gets home and it's like, let me really think about that treadmill run today. And no, you get home from a
should have done this. Should have done that.
There was a guy.
What if I take the lapel and wrap it around his neck 3 times?
There was a guy I rolled with for the first time a few weeks ago by the name of Igor. And he is exactly as you would picture someone named Igor. And for me to get tapped from the bottom cross sides is pretty rare. I've got the MMA Jiu-Jitsu. My arms are in. I'm constantly moving, or I'm settled in a spot where I can't be attacked. He took my lunch, just like ridiculously, where he's at crossbody, and I can see he's attacking my arm, and I was helpless to defend it. And at the end, I came home and I went, oh my God, Monica, this guy just totally kicked my ass at jiu-jitsu. I can't wait to go back and see what he was doing and train with him more and see my progress. It's one of those things that still, after half a lifetime, is exciting for me. And I'm still learning so much new stuff. And after being a 20-year purple belt, I got my brown belt. And it was from my coach, Kurt, that I started training with 2 years ago at the start of COVID. And it meant a lot to me to get the belt from him because he is a jiu-jitsu nerd. That's what he loves. And so to get the respect from him to give me that belt meant a lot. And it's still exciting for me and fun for me. And one of the big reasons why I started training was I wanted to know, can I defend myself in a street altercation? Something like that goes down. Well, you realize very quickly after just a few months of training, yes, you can. You've already done more training than 99% of the people out there that you would ever get into a confrontation with. So now what's the motivation? There has to be something. Is it fighting? Is it competition? Is it the association? Is it the fun of it? And it can be all of those things. But it really becomes a lifestyle. And I've heard that men, once they hit their 30s, they're generally pretty much done making new friends. They have their job, they have their family. That's pretty much their social circle. Maybe some friends they knew from high school, something like that. And to me, that's just the saddest thing. Because I can make friends immediately by going to a jiu-jitsu class, meeting new people, and then trying to kill each other. And you find out immediately who you are, who this person is. If they're going to be somebody that you can jive with, you can be friends with. It really bears everything when you're on the mat rolling with somebody.
Can you talk a little bit about your work with the Alley Expansion Act and a fighters union? I mean, it does seem like this is an idea that's been around for a long time. You've had some big names, Cain Velasquez, GSP coming out and sort of being supportive of that. Clearly, it's something that Dana White's not going to like, and you're not going to be on his Christmas card list anymore.
Yeah, Dana has blocked me on Twitter, so I never know what shit he's
Congratulations.
Talking about. So starting with the lawsuit. So what myself and the named plaintiffs on the lawsuit, what we're saying is that the UFC has illegally monopolized and monopsonized the sport by buying up and shutting down the competition. And they've done this by purchasing Strikeforce, Pride, WEC, Affliction, all these organizations. And then they were blatant about it too. They're celebrating about buying them, about shutting them down. And we can see through internal emails, messages that we've seen that they've blatantly manipulated the rankings, the pay structure, all of these things. So in our lawsuit, we're just trying to get compensated for just wages for what the free market should have been paying us if they had not monopolized the sport. We're about 7 years in. The judge has just ruled that he agrees that we have the ability to do a class action lawsuit, which is huge because instead of filing 1,200 lawsuits, we just have to file one with 1,200 names attached to it. And we believe that the courts so far, and with our financial expert, we've shown how they've underpaid the fighters. And the easiest sport to compare it to is boxing. Because in boxing, under the Ali Act, the boxers get roughly 85% of the money that's brought in. That's what the free market dictates. We see how the free market dictates in baseball and football and basketball. While they have kind of a monopoly on the sport, where it's not a monopoly is that the players can go between teams and play for the highest bidder. Whereas in MMA, you have one organization, the UFC, with 95% of the top talent worldwide that gets anywhere between generally 92, 98 cents out of every dollar spent worldwide on MMA is with the UFC. Now, how do we change that? One is with our lawsuit, by proving that what they've done is illegal. And two is with the Ali Expansion Act. So what the Ali Act says is that a promoter cannot have an investment in a fighter. A promoter cannot be a manager of a fighter. A promoter cannot manipulate the rankings in their organization.
Why is a promoter being a manager of a fighter a bad thing? And can you give me a specific example?
Oh, God, yes. So with the promoter being a manager as well,
just to be like Don King,
think about sports,
Don King and Ali, for example.
Yeah, when you think about sports, let's say the NFL. Who makes it to the Super Bowl? Two best teams, right? Well, what if Cleveland Browns were going to make it to the Super Bowl and Goodell, the NFL commissioner, came in and said, look, man, Cleveland's just too small. We're going to make sure LA, one of their teams, or something, I don't follow football at all, gets into the Super Bowl instead of you. But you understand, this is what's best for business. This is what's best for the sport. This will really grow the sport. Cool. That's not sports. That's entertainment. You might as well call it pro wrestling, pro football, and along the same type of vein. When you have a promoter managing a fighter, they're going to control who fights who gets these matchups. The easiest way to look at it in the UFC is a Conor McGregor. We see Conor McGregor, who was ranked, I think at the time, number 9, fight Dennis Siver, who I think was ranked at number 11, who's a stand-up fighter. Once Conor McGregor beats Dennis Siver, he jumps all the way over contenders 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to get his title shot.
I would say Brock Lesnar getting a title fight after like 2 fights in the UFC would be another example. I don't know if it was 2 or 3.
And those fights can definitely happen. That's not what the Ali Act or the Expansion Act says can't happen. But it also says those that have fought and earned their title shot, they get it. You can always do a second shot in some other way. But I would have loved to see Conor McGregor against Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar was ranked a whole lot higher than Conor McGregor. Or Chad Mendes, when he took the fight on 2 weeks' notice and controlled the fight for 9 minutes and 50 seconds and took a few shots, and the fight got called and Conor was now the champion. I want to see who's the best fighter out there, not who the UFC thinks will be the most marketable fighter. And we see this every once in a while. They'll choose somebody with a look, who gives good interviews, who comes from a country they want to break into, and you'll see that fighter will get paid substantially more than some other fighter in the ranker because they're essentially managing and promoting that fighter. Whereas a promoter should just be the one that owns the cage. We're putting on the fights, and we're going to put in the best fighters here. You want to do the freak show fights? That's fine. But don't stomp over somebody that's earned their shot so you can make more money. And so we went back to Washington, D.C. to work on passing this. I don't have my numbers right in front of me, but I believe it was the original Ali Act passed with, I think there were 16 signers on the bill. There was more Democrats than Republicans. Then it went to the House floor, passed, made into law, no problem. We had 58 signers on our bill, more Republicans than Democrats. We were told that we were going to the House floor to get voted on, get passed into law. And then we had a change of occupancy at the White House, and Donald Trump took office. And you may have noticed Donald Trump and Dana White, they're pretty good friends. And Dana White makes trips to the White House, and Donald Trump makes trips to the UFC. And all of a sudden, our bill got killed. You're not saying that's
connected, are you? Come on.
Could be. Yeah. And there was more things shady going on underneath as they were trying to weaponize against our lawsuit as well, do things like that to shut us down. So it's been amazing to see And how many fighters I know that flat out hate Dana White but love Donald Trump. And I'm sitting here going, it's the same guy. And Donald Trump is the one that's allowing Dana White to continue this monopolization and controlling of this industry. It's just been shocking to me. But it's also been shocking to me to hear people say how much they hate the UFC, but believe the free market should rule everything else. But just this one time, they've been affected by some shady business, so that needs to be fixed, but everything else is fine.
The last time I saw Dana White speaking about this, I actually can't stomach watching the UFC for the last couple of years. I don't want to pay for it. I can't. Something about the uh, packing 50,000 people into an arena in the middle of a once in 100-year pandemic is awful to me. Like the Fight Island stuff, I actually thought that's a pretty good solution. But of course, that doesn't get them the Florida market. That doesn't get them the Texas market. But Dana White was saying, well, you can always go fight somewhere else. You don't have to go fight for me. We're the best. So what would you say to that? Like, if you don't like fighting for the UFC, go fight somewhere else, Nate.
That's much more difficult to do when one company is dictating the pay scale worldwide. So a monopoly doesn't technically mean they're 100% of the business. It means that they have enough control of the business that they do dictate fight terms, fight pay, things like that. If the UFC is only paying 20 grand for a title shot, why would Bellator pay 500,000? They'll pay 25. And the UFC has these contracts where they lock you in and you can never escape unless the UFC wants you to go. So very much like if you earn that title shot, you're the number one contender. If you're not willing to sign a long-term contract, you don't get that title shot. And let's just say you do get the title shot and you get the title. Well, now you're the champ. You can test the free market, right? No. Well, you can fight out your contract, right? No. Because there's a champions clause, which means every fight you fight, you have one more added onto your contract. So you never fight out your contract and can walk away with
unless
the title.
You lose.
And
so you have to lose in order to walk away. Is that correct?
Yeah, you would lose, but then you would lose without the title. And that's their goal as the UFC, to make sure anybody that leaves is damaged goods. And we see a few fighters that talk about, oh, well, I just fought out my contract and now I'm fighting at someplace else. Yeah, you kind of did, but let's look at how the UFC treated you on that. And you left way past your prime and you left on a loss. How much more advantageous would it have been if 5 years prior, in the prime of your fighting career, you could have had that negotiating
below
power?
ONE FC? Yeah, I'll leave the belt in the States, but I'd like to come and fight in Asia. Yeah. Given your obvious dislike of the UFC monopoly, given the uncertainty about things like the Ali Expansion Act going through, I mean, hopefully it does, but you never know. And given the tremendous amount of damage that your body has taken, not to mention, I'm sure, your head, I'm sure you've worried about the concussion damage. What would you do if one of your kids said, hey, Dad, I really want to fight MMA?
Well, their journey would be very different than mine. Because for one thing, they would have a loving, supportive father to help direct them that has been through that. And I would make sure that they got the appropriate training. And there's a line in my Zombie Cage Fighter comic book, which is an autobiographical horror story of my life, where in the sequel, and nobody has read this sequel yet, but there's a scene where my daughter is fighting, and one of the coaches asks her, says, are you sure your father would want you doing this and fighting? He always said that he fought so you didn't have to. And her response is, but I don't have to fight. I want to fight. And I get the opportunity to fight for the right reasons with right coaches that care for me. And a big part of my career, a big part of my training, I didn't have coaches that give a shit about me at all. It is a matter of fact, my first coach at Straight Blast Gym, Matt Thornton, who never competed in MMA, he really wanted to be just kind of a gym superstar. And he's, I forget, 6'8", He's a big, tall guy, weighed anywhere from 220 to 270, something like that. His goal was just to be a gym superstar, and I've seen him knock out people he outweighed by 120 pounds with a shin kick to the head. I had a fight here in Portland against Mike Whitehead. The whole fight lasted about 27 minutes. The first round was 22 minutes long.
Wait.
And we came back out for a 5-minute overtime.
The first round was 22 minutes long?
So, boy, this is a long story, but the organization was World Pancration and Kickboxing Organization, WKPO, something like that.
WKRP.
I'm the main event, fighting against Mike Whitehead. I don't even know who Mike Whitehead is. I found out later he was ranked 3rd in the nation at the time for some form of wrestling, freestyle or Greco-Roman. The referee, the judges, and the timekeeper were chosen out of the crowd. There were people that the promoter just happened to know that bought tickets and showed up to watch the fight. So the bell rings. I had just knocked out one of Whitehead's training partners a couple weeks beforehand. Whitehead runs across the ring while I'm still in my corner. The referee would look at him and say, "Are you ready?" Mike would nod his head and run across the ring, look at me and say, "Are you ready?" And I go, "What the fuck?" And Mike would be on me, pick me up and slam me down. I hit a triangle on him a few times. He would shove me underneath the ropes, punch me through the ropes. The referee would break us, move us back to the center of the ring and tell Mike, "Okay, get back in the triangle." Mike would go, "No." "Get back in the triangle." "No." "Okay, Nate, stand back up. Go to your corner. Mike, are you ready?" "Yes." And Mike would run across the ring, capture me in my corner. This went on. So the first round was supposed to be 15 minutes. The timekeeper bumped the clock. I was told that around 22 minutes, he goes, "I have no idea what the time is here. Should I stop the fight?" At some point during this fight, I'm on his back, punching him in the short ribs for 5 minutes. I hit him with the shot. He's trying to crawl out underneath the ropes, out of the ring. His corner is telling him to do that. I hit him with the shot, grab the rope, pull him back into the ring. The referee starts yelling at me about grabbing the ring. I start yelling at the referee, "I'm doing your job. He's trying to flee the fight. Do your job." Turn around, hit Mike, and we keep on fighting. Fight goes on, 5-minute overtime. And now, finally, my corner spoke up enough that he didn't capture me in my corner. We met in the center of the ring where I had room to sprawl and could do a lot better. The fight ends, and this is what I was told happened. The promoter went up to the judges and said, "Okay, who won?" And the judges said, "We have no idea. We don't know what we're doing. We don't know if it was Mike, if it was Nate." All the promoter heard was Mike. So he goes back into the room and announces Mike Whitehead wins. I've given my first loss. Years later, I'm at some other fights. I see Mike Whitehead and his crew, and they're all kind of laughing and pointing at me. So I walk over and I'm like, "All right, guys, what's the joke?" He goes, "You remember that time you and Mike were fighting and you hit him and then you grabbed onto the ropes, you pulled him back into the ring and you started fighting with the referee and you hit him again and kept on fighting?" Like, "Yeah, I remember that quite well." He goes, "You knocked him out. He was asleep. We have it on camera. But you hit him and he woke up and just kept on fighting." So I count that as a win. I don't know how Mike counts it. Either way. But so as I got into this long story, so that was a Saturday night. The next Friday, I'm training at Straight Blast Gym with Matt Thornton, just me and him. It was the instructor's candidacy course, the ICC. I had picked up 20-ounce sparring gloves, big pillows, so I could hit my training partners without giving them any damage. Thornton was known at most to wear 12-ounce bag gloves. Sometimes he'd wear 8s, sometimes he'd wear 10s. Gloves designed to protect your hands, not to protect your partner. They're not supposed to be used for sparring at all. And again, he's 6'8". I have 72-inch arms, 72 and a half. I have T-Rex arms. There's lightweights with more reach than I've got. So I'm staying at his range, trying to learn how to move my head and not get hit so much. And he just starts teeing off on me. And I hit him with a big right hand and I shove him up against the wall and I go, "What the fuck is your problem? I'm actually fighting. I'm actually training to be a fighter. I'm not trying to be a gym superstar. You're the coach. You're supposed to be making me better." And he said, "Well, the problem with you is you're no good and you never will be. So I'm just using you to make myself better. And at that point, I should have just thanked him and said, hey, thank you for finally showing me exactly who you are. I had my suspicions for quite a while, but now you've just put it out black and white. And that was the last time I ever trained with him. I kept going to that gym because Robert Follis was the other coach there and I trained with him. So I think it was the next weekend, Thornton calls me into his office to discuss things. And he says, with what went down the other week, I still want to train with you because you're an athlete and you help to make me better and you'll push me. And I was like, once again, so you're not really a coach. You're just selfish. You want to use me to make you better. And then he says, to be honest with you, you've already paid for a lifetime membership, so I can't make any more money off of you. It's really not worth my time to train you. And at this point, I was so over it, I started laughing. And I said, man, just a word of advice. Don't tell your students that this is just a cash grab for you. And when I think about that, I think about how this was years before I made it into the UFC. Years before I fought Shoney Carter. Before I was on Tough One. And I am the most loyal guy. I think of people that did stuff for me decades ago, and I'm like, man, I still got to give that guy a thank you and a high five. I would have been throughout my entire career talking about where I trained and how I came from nothing and Straight Blast Gym made me there. Mm-hmm. But instead, I went over to Team Quest and trained with Randy Couture and went from there. So the big difference between myself and if my son or my newborn daughter at some point wanted to train, they would have me there looking out for them, not using them, not trying to toughen them up. Before my fights, they showed the list of attributes, and it was durable, very tough. That's the worst thing you want. You want elusive, hard to hit. And so with my son, if it was something he wanted to do, or like I said, my newborn daughter, we're going to be working on footwork and head movement. We can always learn how to punch hard, but we need to get these skills in first to make sure that this is something that you want to do, you enjoy. John Wayne Parr and his daughter, Gazzy Parr, I think is her name. He's the guy that I want to sit down with because when he fights, he's got a smile on his face, and now his daughter is into Muay Thai and boxing, and she's loving it, and it's been such a positive thing for their family. That's the nut I want to crack, to find out how to really do that. Because as I said before, for me, fighting was very stressful because so much of it depended on it was determining our future. And I can think about the one day that made everything possible. It was after my back surgery and my comeback fight against Pete Sell, where everybody thought that I was done. I had this surgery, I'd never be the same. And Pete drops me in the second round, and I come back in the third, and I knock him out. It was because of that day I went to work with the company that did my back surgery, and my career got extended in the UFC and was able to build everything on that. Fighting has given me almost everything in my life. And it's something I'd like to pass along if it's something that they want to do. But more than anything, I want them to be happy and healthy, whatever pathway that goes down.
Well, we started with one fight, your fight with Jacob Beckman. It'd be remiss of me to not ask you about another fight that you're well known for, and that's your fight against Caleb Starnes. And you mentioned footwork, and he had a very unique style of footwork, which was mostly pointing his legs the other direction from you and jogging away from you for the entire, it was a 3-round fight for 15 minutes. What the hell happened? Like you were ready to fight. And the one part I remember is I think at one point you slipped and fell. And Caleb, who was a jiu-jitsu guy, kind of leapt backwards away from you. Like I think you were a little bit more proficient on your feet than he was. But if I was a jiu-jitsu guy fighting a guy who was a better striker, and that guy fell to the ground, I would thank God and leap on top of him and try and do jiu-jitsu. So, what happened in that fight?
So, like with all my stories, this is another big long one.
Well, it's the last one.
So I just got done with my my back surgery, and I was recovering, and I called up the UFC, and I said, nobody thought this was possible. I'm ready to fight again. I want to fight Caleb Starnes. And Joe Silva, the matchmaker for the UFC, said, that sounds like a great fight. I'll give him a call. Joe Silva called me back and he says, Caleb won't fight you. He says you're not worthy. You lost your last fight against Rich Franklin, and he won his last fight against Chris Liebman. Mine was a title fight. This was a close decision that I disagreed with, but it is what it is. So Joe tells me, we want you to fight Pete Sell in a rematch, because our first fight, I knocked him out quickly with a straight left. He felt that it was an early stoppage, so he wanted a rematch. I didn't want to fight Pete right away. He'd been training for the past 2 years. I'd been having back surgery and recovering and switching teams and custody battle and all this stuff. But Joe Silva calls me and says, Caleb won't fight you. We want you to fight Pete Sell. I said, cool. All right, I'll fight Pete. It's going to be a war. He's angry. He's in shape. He's been training. He's got Matt Serra in his corner, the champ. I'll fight him. I'll win. And then I get to fight Caleb Starnes. And I'm going to end his fucking career. So I fought Pete Sell. And he beat the shit out of me for 2 rounds. And I knocked him out in the 3rd. And then I got the call from Joe Silva. Hey, do you still want to fight Caleb Starnes? Yes. He said, cool.
So there was pre-existing bad blood, sounds like.
To me, that was a pretty big insult.
Okay.
To tell me I'm not worthy to fight someone like him. And for me, I'm very much an emotional fighter. I have to be. I fight best when I'm angry. I'll fight through a wall. And so feeling so disrespected by him from that and watching his tapes, I could see he's a bully. He only does well when he's moving forward. Momentum is on his side. But if you keep him moving backwards, then he questions himself and he can never set. So I just need to stay in his face. And I said, when I walk out, it's in Montreal. Everybody's going to boo me and they're going to cheer for them. But by the end of the fight, they're going to be cheering for me because I'm going to win over the entire crowd because I'm the only real fighter in that cage. And so the first round, he tried a few things. He shot a couple takedowns, but I can be very difficult to take down. And I just kept him moving backwards the whole time. And in the second round, I was thinking to myself, is anyone else noticing this? It seems like he's running away from me the entire time. And by the 3rd round, he was very much of the, I'm just getting the hell out of here.
Yeah, we're talking literally
and I never
jogging
said
away.
Anything. Yeah, and I never tried to disparage him or his character because of this. Because, man, it's a very stressful thing to get in a cage in front of 22,000 people, millions of people at home watching. It's a stressful thing. And we all have off nights. So I never attacked his character, but that was my goal, to end his career. And so at one point I did the running man, chasing after him, and then I heard the 10-second bell go off, and I thought to myself, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to attack, do whatever you want, and I'm just going to be stupid. And I thought to myself, and I'd been to fights before. One that comes to mind is Nate Marquardt and Ivan Salaverry. I was there. They were the main event in I think, the first Ultimate Fight night. And Salaverry just wasn't engaging. And Marquardt was trying to chase him down the entire time. And Marquardt got angry. And so the whole crowd was angry and everybody was upset. This is bullshit. You didn't show up to fight, blah, blah, blah. And so I thought to myself, you came here to see a fight. I can't give that to you, clearly. I can't catch him to do that. But even more so, you came here to make memories. That I can do. So at that 10-second bell, I covered my face and did what I call the rock hammer and just walked at him, and he still bounced away. And then after the fight, and I won by, on one of the scorecards, 10-8 round, all 3 rounds. And I was able to tell the crowd, when I first got here and you were all booing me, I didn't know what to think. But as the fight went along and you started cheering for me, I figured if you can change and I can change, anybody can change, which is the perfect speech from Rocky IV. And so it worked out exactly as I had planned. And my cornerman yelled at Joe Silva, why is that guy even fighting in the UFC? And Joe Silva said, he's done. He'll never fight for us again. So it all came true.
Zombie Cage Fighter comics. other ways that people can kind of follow what you're up to now? You're pretty active on Twitter, where you are Nate Rock
Yeah, and
4.
I'll apologize already. Yeah, if people follow me, I post about what I'm interested in, and that's mostly politics and the hypocrites that I see in there. Anybody that wants to have a reasonable discussion, I'm all for it. And people try to attack me personally. My response is always the same. Man, if you want to talk about an actual issue, I'm here for it all day. Just bring your evidence. And if you're right and I'm wrong, I will happily change my point of view. Because I don't want to be beholden to any kind of club or group or anything except for the truth and honesty. So even with whatever news I get from, whether it's CNN and I catch things on Fox here and there, I just compare it and see what is reality, what's the spin. A lesson I learned a long time ago when I was dealing with Hollywood in my Zombie Cage Fighter screenplay, they said the offer that I was given was just such a bad offer, and I was so upset. How could they try and take advantage of me over this screenplay I spent so much time and money on? And the lawyer I was dealing with started laughing. She said, "What don't you understand? Their job is to make money. Your job is to not be stupid." And I really try to apply that with everything. When I look at what's CNN's business model, they want to get as many viewers as possible. So they're going to sensationalize the thing that they think will get the most eyes, get the most clicks. Same thing with Fox. So if I'm looking at something with that kind of a viewpoint of, well, what's your angle? What are you trying to do? Let me see through that. Is this a lie? Is this bullshit? Is it truth, but it's really not as big of a deal as you're trying to make it? That's where I sit on most things. And with the Zombie Cage Fighter comic book, we've just about got the website ready, zombiecagefighter.com, where people will be able to order their own. I can't tell you how proud I am of this book. The team that came together, the artist that did the pages, the cover artist, Alex Horley, it's just been incredible. For me, just an old school comic book nerd, to have my own comic, to have it done so well, I'm so proud of this. Again, the artists that have come together with my shirts and the book, and I even have a Zombie Cage Fighter statue made by Randy Bowen, the greatest superhero sculptor the world has ever seen. It's just incredible. And Twitter is where I'm at most of the time these days. That's where you found me. That's pretty much it. Instagram, occasionally, I usually forget about Instagram, and all too often, I'll be on my phone and I'll be looking at my son and he's wanting to play Hot Wheels. And I think to myself, what's going to be a better memory in a few years? Playing Hot Wheels with my boy or tweeting out some rage at some hypocrisy that I've seen. And so there's been a few times where I delete Twitter off my phone so I can kind of recenter. And the thing is my life is really amazing. I've gone further than I ever considered possible. I thought I would just work at a dead-end job and that would be pretty much it. But instead, I've been able to travel around the world. I've been able to fight in front of millions of people and go be a part of Armed Forces Entertainment Tours, have my own comic book, have a beautiful, loving, supportive wife, have 3 kids now, and it's just, my life is just so far beyond anything I ever dreamed. I just get upset at the injustice, the hypocrisy, the greed that I see out there. And I keep hoping that people will kind of open their eyes and decide with their votes what are the priorities here for this nation and our world. Because we're seeing wildfires, extreme temperatures, the melting of the ice, the glaciers. I've seen the glaciers in Alaska and where they used to be and where they are now and how things are changing. We need to do things about this. But it's become politicized, which just blows my mind. How is protecting the earth something to be politicized? This is where we live. It makes no sense to me. But they'll tie something to jobs, when in reality what they mean is, we're paid by the oil and gas industry, so we're going to push the oil and gas industry. They won't talk about how green energy will provide more jobs in the future, and it'll be better, and how the tax structure used to be over the wealthy, and how much better things used to be. When they always talk about making America great again, they never get into specifics. Are you talking about the higher tax rates for the wealthy? Or are you talking about segregated water fountains? I'm not sure what your angle is here.
I'm guessing it's mostly option 2, unfortunately. Uh,
Unfortunately.
yeah. I think we could go on. Uh, I can't say I disagree with anything that you've said. So thank you very much for coming on, Nate, and best of luck with everything. If there's something I can do to help, let me know. And good
Will
luck with your
do.
projects in the future.
Thank you very much.